Okay. All right, so to look at this, you know, the text is way too big, and it's on top of stacked one on top of another. And so the first thing I'm going to look at this and say is, look at it and think, well, the scale is off for this drawing, right? My text is very large. My annotation items, they are really large, right? So to remind you, our scale is down here in the corner, right? And it is indeed kind of a weird scale. It's 1 inch is equal to 400 feet, okay? So I'm going to maybe change this to something like 1/8 of an inch, okay? Okay, 1/8 of an inch. My tags look pretty good, but I am not seeing a whole lot go on the screen, right? So we need to talk about that. But one thing I want to point out that's actually pretty obvious in this, you know, in this illustration is that, sorry, I just lost, let me leave 1/8 inch. Okay, is that all of my items on the screen, when I changed the scale, they scaled with that scale, right? So unlike AutoCAD, where unless you're using annotative blocks and different things, it's generally kind of dumb type annotation, where if you change, you know, the scale of your drawing, you have to change your dimension style and your text style and all of those things so that they're the right height according to the scale that you have, you know, drawn everything in AutoCAD in. What's really great about Revit is that process is automated. So if I change the scale, the text size automatically changes and all of my annotation changes. And that will include dimensions and section markers and, you know, elevation markers and different things like that, right? So that's pretty nice. And that was obviously kind of the #1 problem I had here, was my scale was off, okay? Now the second problem I have is that I know that I have information here, but the information is not showing, right? And this, again, this happens all the time. You have a lot of people working in the same file, and they are changing the visual styles of the file continually, right? So you need to know how to navigate that. So, you know, me looking at this, I'm thinking, well, I know there was some information here, but I'm not seeing it. I'm seeing an elevation marker here and here, but I'm not seeing one up here or over here. So that leads me to my, you know, my next assumption, which is my crop region is, you know, wonky and it's filtering things out that it shouldn't. So I'm going to come down here to my show crop region. And indeed, right, my crop region is kind of tiny. I'm going to click on it. I'm going to grab this little blue grip, extend it up top. I'm going to extend it over here to the side. And look at all of that is there, right? Another thing that you can do if you don't want to use the crop region, make it visible and then kind of expand it to kind of test your theory that the crop region isn't working, you can choose to not crop the drawing itself. So this icon, hide crop region, show crop region, will very, you know, easily show you where that is and you can expand it. But this icon next to it, do not crop view, even if this crop region was kind of inappropriate, right? Just like that, okay? If I click on this icon, do not crop view, it will show me everything that is outside of that crop region, right? So I can just kind of take a peek, okay? Now I'm gonna re-extend that and let's look at some of our modification commands. Okay, so last time we met, we talked about, you know, kind of just the real basic items. We learned how to draw a wall, and we did that by clicking on the wall. We didn't change any of the settings, but we learned that we can create geometry, you know, a wall using a line, a rectangle, polygons, circles, arcs, you know, a pick, those different types of things, okay? So you all at this point could come in here, click on wall, not knowing how to change any of the settings of a wall, click on line, right, and start drawing a wall, right? We all kind of know that, okay? I'm gonna hit undo, Control Z, all right? Now, how do I, once I've created objects, how do I modify them? And how do I modify them, meaning how do I copy them? How do I rotate them? How do I align objects? How do I offset, trim, and extend, and mirror? Okay, so we've got 6 different modification commands we're gonna talk about today. And I think, you know, these are kind of the most basic. There are also a few other advanced ones that I think once we get a little further with geometry creation that we can look at. Things like array and it's kind of the only one I'm thinking of at this point. Let's see, array and scale. What's that? There is fillet, yeah, yep, yes. Funny enough, though, I don't use, I'm assuming you use fillet to square off your corners. Is that right? We're going to use trim in Revit to do that, right? Because I use fillet all the time in AutoCAD to square off my corners instead of trimming and extending, right? But Revit has combined those into trim. So, okay, so let's look at some of our modification commands. All right, we have align. And this is this is something we have in AutoCAD, but it functions differently in AutoCAD. In AutoCAD, you essentially will, the definition is the same, but the execution is slightly different. Okay, it's a lot more complicated in AutoCAD. But essentially, align will allow you to reference one object and align a second object to that position of the first object. All right. A lot of these explanations are kind of more complicated than the actual modification, so I'm just going to do the modification and show you. All right. You're going to notice that my ribbon is set to the Modify tab all the way down here. If I hit Escape, you can clear out of any command you're currently in and go to Modify. Most of our modification commands are right here on this Modify tool palette, right? And if you hover over these, you'll get the icon or a little picture of what it looks like, and then the keyboard shortcut, okay? Which I still owe you guys the keyboard shortcuts. Align is AL. You can click on the icon to initiate the command, and you can also, if you are just in your drawing board, right, you can type AL and it will initiate the command, okay? AutoCAD users are going to have to get used to the idea or the operation of not using enter for everything. We don't type AL enter, right? AL initiates the command and that's it. You don't have to use enter, all right? You're also going to have to get used to the idea that we don't have a formalized command line, right? So when you're typing AL, it doesn't actually type in somewhere. It's an invisible entry, right? So I type AL. It initiates the align command. Now, while I don't have a formalized command line at the bottom of my screen, I do have a little bit of a hint of what I need to do. So if I am lost in the command or forget what needs to go next, I'll look down here and it says, please select the line or point reference for alignment. So where do I want my objects to align to, essentially? That's going to be my first selection. I'm going to zoom in here a little. Now, if I hover over the object, you notice first kind of my wall face highlights for my selection. And if I move a little bit more to the right, the center line highlights. And if I move again, the other side of the wall highlights, okay? Up here in this is the modify toolbar right here, options toolbar right here. You're going to notice that the preference here is for wall faces. And that means that by default, when I kind of get near this object, it's going to select a wall face for alignment first, right? But if I move a little bit further, I can get the midpoint, and I can get the other side, okay? Another thing I want to remind you of is if I hover over this side, but I want to get the midpoint, I can tab. I just tab once and I let go of the key. So tab, let go. And it will toggle me between selections. Tab. If you go too far, sometimes it'll be like no, and it will ding, right? But right now, if I want to go to the middle, I can tab. And now if I click, right, it will select that midpoint for alignment. Okay. Before I do this alignment, I also want to show you one other option, right? Revit is all about the options. And just a little warning, the options usually only show as you are performing the operation. So after I create the alignment, generally, some of these will still occur or show, but generally that option goes away once I've performed the operation. And you're thinking, well, I know I want to align something and I know I want multiple alignments. Where is that option, right? But a lot of times they'll go away if you've already performed it or if you don't have something selected, okay? So if I want to align, I'm going to clear out and just kind of start over because I've talked a lot between initiating the command and actually performing it. I'm going to type AL, no enter. I'm going to click on the object I want to align to in whatever position. So, zoom in here. Zooming and panning don't break my command, right? Zoom. I click, And by doing that, now when I move my mouse, I've got this blue dashed line established. So that's kind of reminding me visually where I've started that alignment, okay? Now I need to choose the object I want to align to that point. So I look down here, it says, please select an entity to align. Okay, and it even says it will move into alignment with the reference. This is my reference. So now I come over here, I hover till I get the point I want. If I can't catch the point I want, I tab, let go, right? I'm just clicking tab, click, and it aligns it. Yep, let's do it all the way down here. So AL, I click my reference, click, and I click on the object to align, click. All right, escape. AL, click, and they align. Okay. So multiple alignments, you notice we have this multiple alignment option here. This will occur when you have several items that you want to move to the same point, right? So let's say that I want to align the top of all of these walls or these objects with maybe the bottom of this wall. AL, click. Let's do the bottom here. Click. Oops, sorry. AL. I forgot to click multiple alignment. That was my problem. Click. Now I've established my reference. In order for me to be able to do all of these in sequential movements without reinitiating the command, I'm going to come up here to align multiple alignment. Click. Check mark that. And click. So you're noticing a couple of things here, right? That in AutoCAD, that's an extend, right? So align will allow you to take one object and line it up with another, right, in kind of the same plane. But it will also allow you to take an object and extend it and align it with a point somewhere else, right? And that occurs in an extend operation and also in a trim sort of operation. So I can type AL, I can click up here, click, and these will trim back, click. Oh, that one, I knew there was something there, but it went back up. So this one extended up to that, and because these were touching, this one came down to, or to that alignment there, right? So align just allows you to start moving things into specific places you want them to go, all right? In AutoCAD, generally you are drawing things exactly where they need to go, right? You draw lines and you place objects exactly where they need to go. And this tool is really helpful in Revit because a lot of times in Revit, you place an object just somewhere in space and then you align it to its final destination, okay? So you will use this a lot by placing an object somewhere and then moving it to its final accurate spot in Revit, okay? Another thing that is helpful with this kind of movement, let me just insert this, is reference planes. You're going to be using reference planes a lot to align things, okay? A reference plane is a lot like a construction line in AutoCAD, like an X line or array that you probably draw to establish kind of a data marker to draw things to or from, right? So you draw when you're drawing an elevation, right? You use the floor plan and you use X line or array to establish points on the floor plan that you then construct the elevation from, right? Reference planes are kind of used in the same way. They establish kind of a data marker in space, right, that you align objects to. The difference between something like an X line or array in AutoCAD and a reference plane, the difference is reference planes don't print, right? So I can draw as many reference planes in Revit as I want, and they don't print, okay? So usually when I start drawing, I will come in, reference plane is RP. You can also find it under the architecture tab at the very end, reference plane, but super cumbersome to go to that tab and click on the icon, right? So RP, click. All right, it's a green dashed line, and that's an object that won't print but will establish a point that you are trying to draw to in Revit, right? So now, right, I kind of established these reference planes. And normally the way I work is I will use dimensions and I'll get them in the exact spot that I want them to be, and then I will align my walls to those objects. So AL, click on my reference plane, click the outside of my wall. AL, align, click my reference plane, click the outside of my wall, right? And now I have my two walls. AL, click my reference plane, click the top of my wall. And I have multiple alignments selected, so I can come over here and click on that one. AL, click, 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 and we align. All right. Alignment will work in any orientation. It can be diagonal, it can be straight up and down, it can be horizontal. AL, click, I establish my reference, click, and it aligns. AL, I want to align the end of this with that, click, establish my reference, click, and extend that over. Okay. AL, click, click, right? So in AutoCAD we use trim, extend, and fillet to kind of create this type of geometry. In Revit we're going to use align, and we're also going to start using trim to do that, okay? Okay, any questions on align so far? Once we get through all of these commands, I'll draw a little floor plan on the screen so you can watch how I go about using all of these kind of new commands that sound similar to commands in AutoCAD together to create something. Okay, we have move, okay, and if I come back up here to my ribbon and I go to modify, click, I have move right here, MV. M as in mother, V as in Virginia, MV, okay. Now, move, generally speaking, I think the better workflow for move is to select the object first, right? And then type MV. We're going to click a base point and move the object. Click to establish a point on that object or near that object that then we can move the object to something, click, or MV, click, and I could type in a dimension, something like 4 foot, and it moves 4 feet, right? This is just like AutoCAD. The only difference between AutoCAD and Revit in this instance is that you generally want to click on the object first and then perform the operation, right? I can still click on move and then click on the object, right? But I feel weird because then actually I do have to hit enter, and it's very kind of counterintuitive in Revit, right? I can select multiple items in Revit. Something you're probably noticing is that when I click on one object and then I click on another, click, it deselects the first and keeps the second selected, right? Again, different than AutoCAD. If I want to add to my selection set, I'm going to hold down the shift or the control key, hold it, click, click, while I'm holding the control key. Hit escape, clear out. Everything grays out and you can't move, but there's a little box on your screen with an X, click the X. Okay, so I've selected everything. Now I'm going to click on move. Click. I establish a base point. Click. Move in the direction I want to go, and I can either click or type a dimension. 10, enter. And you remember 10 implies 10 feet in Revit, right? As opposed to 10 inches, which is the default unit in AutoCAD. Okay, these are still selected. MV, click, click. Okay, MV, click. A couple of options you're going to notice up here, and we have a constrain and a disjoin. These are similar to ortho somewhat in their usage. If I constrain, a lot of times I won't be able to be allowed to move in one direction or the other. So sometimes it's horizontal, in this probably because my cursor was moving this direction, but other times if it's an object connected to something, it will only move vertical, right? So it kind of depends on the object. I also have disjoin, which means, hey, don't constrain, just kind of let me move wherever I want to go. So that is essentially like having ortho on and then turning it off. Okay. I'm hurrying through these today, again, because I have to go to that meeting, but we will go back over these again on Monday, all right? So I'll go back over drawing quickly. I'll go back over our modifications Monday. We'll talk about linking files and then getting some 3D elements, okay? Align, move. We have offset, okay? Our offset command, OF, or here's the icon. Offset will allow you to take one object and copy it a specific distance from another, all right? So if I want to, for example, create a wall that is exactly 3 feet from this wall, I could use copy, I could use move. Well, move would just move it, but I could also offset it, which would leave that in that first object and offset it and make a copy a specific distance from that same object. This one is very similar to AutoCAD. So offset, click. It's going to ask me to input the offset distance, okay? So 1 foot. I could also type in something like 5 foot, enter, okay? You'll notice there's a copy option here. So right now, if I offset my first object, it will copy it. So it will leave the original object and copy a second object. If I unselect that, it will move that object. So it will delete the first object and just take keep the copy, okay? I have a numeric offset and I have a graphic offset. So I have the option to, if I choose graphic, I have the option to click and then click a second spot, right? Graphic, just I'm eyeballing it essentially. We're gonna choose numeric where I input a number here and then I hover over an object. See how I hover? And it previews where that second object's going to go. So now I click, and that first object is 5 feet from the second object is 5 feet from the first object. Click, click, click. This is a repetitive, or it's a chain type operation where I can just keep going, right? Click, 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 click. Right, and you're noticing that it is sort of breaking these objects up into pieces, right? So even in this with a hexagon, it is, when I click on these objects, it separates them out. It doesn't uniformly pick the entire object, okay? But that doesn't make sense that that would be the only way of doing this, right? And I want to remind you of some of our selection methods, okay? If I hover over an object, it kind of turns blue. I haven't clicked yet. But if I'm hovering over an object and I press tab and let go, tab, see how it selects them all at the same time? Okay, nice, right? If you hold tab, let me show you what will happen if you hold tab. You got that action going on, right? But if I just click it once, it highlights, and then I click my mouse and everybody's totally busted when they make a mistake in this room unless you mute your sound, right? Like even the circle is broken down into 2 pieces. So I hover, I tab once, click. I hover, I tab once, click my mouse. Okay. If I hold my tab down, I get this. See that? What's going on there? And you probably will get a little warning here from that. Okay, so we have align, move, and offset. We have rotate, mirror, and trim and extend, essentially, okay? And again, I'm going through these quickly today, but I will go back over them on Monday. All right, rotate. Very similar to AutoCAD. Again, a lot of these are similar to AutoCAD. Rotate will allow you to rotate an object about a specific axis, okay? Click on rotate. Our RO is the shortcut. Again, in Revit, and you'll find this with a lot of commands, I just did that from being near the icon, but I think a better workflow is to select the objects that you want to rotate first and then click on the rotate command icon, or click on it and then type RO. All right. Maybe you're noticing this. Revit is a much more visible software than AutoCAD, right? Yep, we're good. Thanks. When I rotate something in AutoCAD, right, I don't necessarily get a whole lot of visual connection with my rotation. But here in Revit, I definitely have an axis. I definitely have kind of a point of beginning, okay? and it helps me establish a reference point for rotating. So the way rotate works is I'm going to click to establish kind of a baseline. Click. Now from this point, I want to go this direction and I want to go 90 degrees. 90. Enter. Okay. Let me undo that. I click on the object, RO. Okay, I get a little grip at the center, which means that object, it's going to pivot around that point. I click, I establish a base reference, I move in the direction I want to go, and I can type, you know, an angle, 30 degrees, enter, and it rotates at 30 degrees. Okay. Now, if I want to change where, I'm going to type RO, if I want to change where it rotates about, I can click on this little blue grip, click and hold my mouse, and drag it to another spot. Do you see how it's snapping to that bottom end point? When I let go, okay, click, establish my base point, click again, and I just rotated it. All right, I'm going to hit undo, click, RO. Again, I do keyboard shortcuts for most things. I click on the little blue grip. I could even drag it out in space, right? If I wanted to rotate about this point, click, click, and we've rotated. Okay. Click, RO, click, click, pretty straightforward. Okay, I can rotate multiple objects at the same time, right? If I wanted to select all these objects at the same time, I could do that. All right, let's talk about mirror. Mirror, again, just like AutoCAD, it will allow you to select objects and make an exact copy of those objects about an axis that you specify, and the copy is a mirrored copy. So it's the opposite, right? So if I mirror this object right at this point, it will become a rectangle. If I mirror this object about an axis right here, it will become the top part of a triangle. Okay, so let's talk about mirror. We've got two types of mirrors. We have a mirror with a pick axis, and we have a mirror with a draw axis. All right, mirror with a pick is, let me show you where that's helpful. Oh, just wait till we get to doors, you guys, especially you AutoCAD people. It's gonna be magical. Okay, so mirror with a pick is helpful when you have kind of, you know, maybe an architectural element and you have something that you want to mirror it about, right? So I can pick this wall as my mirror axis, right? And that's pretty helpful. Mirror with a drawn axis is helpful when I have an object and I don't have something, you know, kind of where I want to mirror it about, right? So if I wanted to, for example, and you guys can just use, you know, maybe this, we'll just do a weird mirror. But if I wanted to, for example, mirror this door about this wall, I would select the door, right? MI is mirror, MI, oop, no, it's not, I lied, MM, I think I might have changed mine on my Revit to match my AutoCAD MI. So the default MM, okay? And now you'll notice, you know, my cursor has the little mirror about an axis that I pick, and now I hover over the object I want to mirror about. Click, and it mirrors that door, escape. Okay, let me undo that. I click on my door, mirror, click my axes, which is that object, click, and it mirrors it. Okay, now if I wanted to, for example, you know, we're going to perform a mirror on this object, right? If I select the whole thing and I want to mirror it with a pick, it might get an error. In fact, I will likely get an error, right? So if I wanted to mirror this object about itself over this axis, click, it'll say, hey, what are you doing? You have walls that overlap, right? It does still mirror it and there still is overlap, but anyway, you guys get the idea. Escape, escape. Okay. The second type of mirror we have is with a drawn axis, DM. DM. Okay, I'm going to pick this object, DM, and it's going to say draw the axes where you want to mirror this about. Click, click, and it mirrors it about that axis. All right, let me do that again. Control Z. I click on it, mirror with a drawn axis. Now if I were to draw it right here, click, click, see it touches and it joins right there, right? So I get a point. I'm going to undo that, Control Z. But if I move a distance away, click, click, you see my axis was here, so I get that distance to the axes and then that same distance mirrored over that line. Okay. So when you're in a situation, you'll be able to pretty evidently tell, you know, what kind of mirror you want, whether you want one to be picked or you know, because you're using existing architecture to create the mirror, or if you need to just draw an axis and create things that way. Let me just quickly with the mirror, you will notice that when I mirror something, it will give me the option to copy. Okay. And what that means is, hey, do you want to create a copy so you have two of them? Or would you like only to have that second object and the first one to go away, right? So the copy will allow you to, you know, make a copy or to not have a copy and just have one object, okay? And finally today, we've got 5 minutes to finish trim and extend, all right? In AutoCAD, you know, when you are creating squared off corners, you use fillet with a 0 radius, and that will give you a great squared off corner. You can also extend an object and then extend a second object to that object and then trim off the excess to create a squared corner, right? In Revit, when you are creating squared off corners, which is generally what you're using trim and extend, right, and or fillet in AutoCAD for, it's all one command. So in Revit, trim and extend, which creates a filleted squared corner, one command, okay? So for example, if this was going to be a enclosed area, right, I would use trim to square off those corners. The keyboard shortcut is TR, and it is this command right, this icon right here, TR. Okay. Trim, pick item 1, pick item 2, click, and it squares them off. Isn't that great? Click, 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 click. And they can even be from really far away, like click, 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 right? Click, click.
But
yep.
Again, like in AutoCAD, you can also use like the align command to do that, right? It doesn't matter.
Align?
Yeah, like
extend?
Extend.
Yes, you can extend. Yeah, so
you'll have the same
Yep, exactly. Yep. So this is trim and extend all in one, right? And it's also what you get when you fillet in AutoCAD. And what's nice about this is that you get a squared off corner that has no gaps, right? We don't hatch traditionally like we do in AutoCAD. So in AutoCAD, you probably fillet because you don't want to have a gap, right? And then when you hatch, your hatch doesn't work or it goes all over, whatever. We don't hatch in Revit the same way we do in AutoCAD, so it's not as big of a deal, right? But we still do want corners that meet and join and square off and don't have gaps, okay? All right, trim and extend. We also have kind of a trim and extend elements, and to be honest, I never use these. I cannot think of one time I've ever used these because we have the regular TR, right? And it's very easy for you to take objects and kind of stretch them out in Revit. But let me just show you what these are capable of. These are the same command, but one is with one object and one is with multiple objects, okay? But essentially this will allow you to extend, trim or extend objects at a certain boundary, all right? So I click on trim or extend single element, click. This is just like the long version of trim or extend in AutoCAD where I select a boundary I want to extend my object to, click, and then I pick my object, click, right? And because I only selected one object, this one series, right, it will only let me do one. But if I click on the multiple, click, and I pick my boundary, let's pick this reference plane. The boundary can be almost anything, click, and then I select these objects, click, click, right? Those objects extend to that object. There may have been one time when I used it, right? But not very many. Okay. So I wouldn't worry too much about these. You know, this trim is going to be your best friend here. We're going to fit one more thing in here before I go. And that is split. Okay. We have a split and a split with a gap. Okay. And I'll show you throughout the semester where the appropriate use of each one is and why you would use them. But this is essentially the same command as break in AutoCAD, where you want to take a line geometry and you want to cut it, right? You want to create a break so that you can change the layer or delete half of it or do something to that line, right? And the same applies in Revit, where maybe half the wall is brick and half the wall is CMU, right? We want to be able to break it or split it in Revit to perform different operations on the different walls, okay? So split is right here, SL, and split with a gap, okay? That one doesn't look like it has a keyboard shortcut. So if I click on split, I get a little knife. Again, Revit's very visual, right? So I click on an object, click, and where I click, it splits. Those are now, when I hit escape and get out of the command, I have object 1 and I have object 2. Okay? Split with a gap, click, click, creates a little gap.
Would you give you the highlight, the midpoint or something?
You can, yeah. So if I click on split, you should be able to grab the midpoint. Ooh, let's force it. If you right click, ooh, that's not showing it. Good question. I remember being able to grab the midpoint. I'm thinking it's snapping to the midpoint, but it's not showing the midpoint. So how do...
It seems like it flips when you hit the midpoint.
It's, yeah, it kind of, it snaps to it a little bit, like you feel it, you don't feel it, but you can...
15.6 and then it flips to the other side.
Yeah. If we want to make sure, right, it's not showing me the midpoint, okay, I don't really like that very much, but if we needed to find the exact midpoint, there are some other ways of doing it. We could use a reference plane, so RP, and I could come down here and I could find the midpoint. Click, draw a reference plane, which doesn't print, right? And then I could use my split tool and it will hit that point. Click. Okay. And again, you can delete these, but they won't print anyway. I'm gonna hit delete. Okay. So again, when we get back together on Monday, we'll talk about these. We'll do a little drawing exercise likely in class to show you, hey, remember this is how we draw walls, how we use our drawing tools. And then when we, have some things drawn, we'll talk about modifying them. So where do we use align? Where do we use move, right? All those great things. Now that you kind of know, have a general sense of these tools, this assignment will likely make more sense, right? So this wall right here, we're going to align it with that wall, right? Or wait, let's see, this wall, sorry, that wall. So this line, this wall and that wall will align. This wall and this wall will align. And you're just going to trim and do whatever you need to do to make this floor plan look exactly like that floor plan, okay? And if I do AL, well, I guess you could. Yes, you could. You could, right? I guess that's a valid way of going about it. You know what? My philosophy is if you can do it, then go ahead, right? If you can figure it out, go right ahead. So if you wanted to, right, AL, align, click, click, right? It's not that big of a deal anyway to start using these tools. Align, click, oops. AL, align, click, click, trim, TR, click, click, click. Okay, so you guys kind of get the idea, right? We're just gonna come around here and start forming that, okay? Yeah, there you go. See, it's easy. Look how fast Revit is. Okay. All right, so that'll be your assignment. I will be back at 1 o'clock. I just have to run over there for an hour. So if you guys want to work here, you know, you can work and I'll come back and you can ask questions if you get stuck. If you want to go, that's fine. But I have to run over to that meeting right now.